we were the tech people for the school and for the whole state at the time. And I remember one of the first times we ever did training together. Uh, I didn't think of myself as a genius when it came to technology, but um, because I could follow instructions and I did what he asked me to do in the training, I was actually trained by him in the technology of teaching at that time, in a class I took to renew my certification as a teacher. And because I could do the basic things like open a document, create a document, save a document, um, type where I'm supposed to type, create a background for a PowerPoint presentation or some other kind of presentation. Because I could do those very basic things, I was his star student. I mean, complete star student. There were other teachers that never did get to a point where they made the basic documents that we had to make for that class. Um, and so I kind of got taken in as one of the tech people because I just had kind of basic skills in technology. And I remember one of our first training events, it was at our school. We started to do a presentation, and Dan was doing the presentation. He was kind of the straw that stirred the drink. He was the star of the show. Um, and he was doing this just very basic stuff. And he was talking about what things we were going to be learning. We're going to be learning things like Microsoft Word and how to create documents and how to save documents and how to print them, how to use them for your classroom. Ways that you would use Word in your classroom that you and your students would use, and also Microsoft Excel and Microsoft PowerPoint and Publisher, which was a big thing back then, and other different tools that we'd be using, like digital cameras and scan converters, which took a computer's um, scan rate and turned it into dumbed it down so that a regular old TV could show the presentation. This was the ancient days of technology, and we were talking about these amazing things that we were going to be doing in the classroom with technology. And after his introduction, he said, "Are there any questions at this point? Anything that you would like to know about?" And this hand went up in the back, and this question told us that we needed to maybe back off a little bit and slow down beyond even what we thought we were doing. We thought we were crawling glacial speed, but hand went up and it was a woman in the back. And Dan said, "Hey, what's your question?" She said, "I just need to know one thing. How are you making that pointy thing on the screen move around like that?" And so we knew we were in trouble. Uh, I mean, we really did. Um, and another time we were doing training, and this was not somebody's fault or anything like that. But one of the things that we ran into was that, well, this was two things combined. One was a lot of folks were afraid that there was some sort of like self-destruct button on the keyboard for a computer. I mean, computers were so completely new in the classroom. We actually had a teacher retire because they told him that he was getting computers in his room, and he didn't want to mess with that. He'd been teaching at PHS for nearly 40 years, and he was like, "No, I'm not learning this." And he went down and turned in his papers. Um, but there were teachers. I mean, they were genuinely afraid that they could do something to blow the computer up. Um, and so we always had to start by reassuring them um, that they were okay, that wasn't going to happen. There isn't a combination of keys that you can touch that will self-destruct the computer. And the other thing that was true was when we were doing training, when we would start, before we'd actually need them to be on the computers, before we would do things with it, and we needed to talk to them, and we needed them to listen. Especially with administrators, we had this problem where instead of listening to us, they would play solitaire on the computers, which we liked solitaire because it taught you mouse skills, um, mouse, not math. And we didn't mind if people did that while nothing else was going on. But if we were talking and needed them to hear things, um, them playing solitaire was kind of not conducive to that. And so we would have this habit of saying, okay, we need everybody before we start. turn off the monitor on your computer, and we'll tell you when to turn it back on. And so we were doing our presentation. We were talking, and Dan ended with the whole "you can't blow up your computer" thing. There's no, there's no self-destruct button on a computer keyboard. You can't hit the wrong button and you can't blow it up. And then he said, "Okay, we're gonna get started now. Everybody, reach up and push the button, turn on your monitor." And the woman right next to him, I think it was a woman. I can't remember. The main thing isn't man or woman, but the person right next to him reaches up, pushes the button on the monitor, and I'm not making this up. I'm not joking. Flames shot feet out from the back of that monitor. I mean, not sparks, not smoke, flames shot out of the back of that monitor. And the person went, "Oh," and Dan went, "Oh," because he was right next to it. And they said, "Did I do something wrong?" And Dan, and this is one of the things I loved about Dan, he always had the right response at the right moment. He said, "Well, you must have. Did you see anybody else's monitor blow up?" And that didn't go well in terms of convincing people that their computer was safe in their hands. Um, but another thing with technology, um, we struggled during those times with kids doing things on computers they weren't supposed to do. Um, because in the ancient days of computers, we didn't have filtering software. I mean, they started to use it, but it was very ineffective. It didn't, if you did it, there were easy workarounds to get to it. So there were kids, to be frank, there were kids who were using pornography. They were viewing pornography um, on the internet. Now that's very, very difficult to do. And if you do, they get a signal at the county that's says this kid looked up this item, and I won't say any of the words, but anyway. Um, so one day we were having our meeting during lunch, and this kid came in and said, "Mrs. Fairchild," I remember it was June Fairchild, sent the kid down. "Mrs. Fairchild wants to know if the internet's working because she can't get it to work in her room." And so we had this thing where we had the server right behind Dan where he was sitting. Um, we would, if we knew if we could get on the internet on this server, which was where the internet came into the building, then it was a problem with her individual computer or somewhere in that area. And but if it didn't work there, we would let people know the internet's down. So he reaches back and he um, means to type Nike.com. That's a website he knows, and he knows that it's a safe website. Nothing weird's going to happen if Nike.com pops up. It's going to be shoes. Back then, Nike was basically just shoes. But anyway, he reaches back and he types Nike.com. Only he doesn't type Nike.com. He accidentally types Niki.com. I'm sorry, Niki. Well, Niki.com was a website, but it was not about shoes. It was about a young lady named Nikki, who was apparently, based on what we saw on the screen, very healthy, very friendly, and maybe allergic to clothes. So I hope that gives you the message of what kind of website Nikki.com was. Um, so Dan reaches up real quickly, grabs the mouse, and closes the window. Well, this was one of those websites that had 1,000 pop-ups. So he closed that window, which popped up another window that had a message from another young lady who was very friendly but wasn't expecting company. So he closed that window, and another one popped up. And finally, he just reaches up and turns off the monitor and turns to the kid, who is completely traumatized at this point, and says, "Tell Mrs. Fairchild the internet's working." And the kid just kind of mumbles something and leaves. So the next part of that story is we were doing training not very long after that, maybe a week or two after that, at the county. somewhere in the county, um, um, a computer lab. I can't even remember where it was, but um, we were doing this training. Dan and I went to it. It was an after school training, and they were showing us new tech tools. And one of the ones they were showing us was filtering software. And so they said, this is how the filtering software works. If you search for a term that you're not supposed to search for, a thing will pop up and say that term is blocked. You can't use it. So we got to talking. We did our thing where we did some searches and stuff like that. And we got this idea. Now, what if a kid didn't do a search but went straight to a website? Would it still filter it? So Dan got the bright idea of trying Nikki out again and see if she was still home. And so he goes up to the bar at the top, the address bar, where you type in the address of a website, and he types in Nikki.com. Well, Nikki's home. Popped right up. And did I mention, by the way, that it was kind of the room was arranged so that everybody could see everybody's monitor? And Dan and I were the only boys in the room. Everybody else in the room was a woman. And so, including Nikki, who was again not dressed. So Dan is trying to close all the windows that are popping up that have all these naked women on it. And I am laughing so hard that I literally roll out of my chair. And finally, Dan does it again. He just cuts off the monitor, and he's like, we need to talk about this filtering software. I don't think it's going to work the way we had hoped. And so we moved on.